According to the old song, love and marriage go together like a horse and carriage. But it's not always plain sailing, and for one young bridegroom, his world of happiness was turned upside down in the summer of 1879. In early July that year, a young woman from Banff arrived at Stirling railway station. She accosted the station police officer and asked him for directions to a good lodging house where she could stay for a few days. Being a helpful sort, he said she could stay at his house. In those days, this was not uncommon. He inquired about the purpose of her visit, and she told him she had come down to the area under a set of very unusual circumstances. It was the evening of Wednesday, 9th July, and as the two of them sat in the officer's house drinking tea, she told him her story. She said her name was Sarah Booth, and that she'd received a letter the previous day from Alva. At the time, Alva was in Stirlingshire, but now is in Clackmannanshire. It was from an anonymous source, informing her that the father of her child, William Eady, a weaver, had been married the Friday before and was about to emigrate to Boston in America with his new wife, Isabella Carmichael, the following day, the 10th. Angered by the letter, she'd hastily packed a bag and headed straight to Stirling in order to take out a warrant against him, as he'd paid no maintenance towards the child they'd conceived while he was working in Banff. The officer told her he would do all he could to assist her. The next morning, Booth went to a local solicitor's office, while the officer kept a watchful eye on the trains heading from the Hill Foots into Stirling train station. The train arrived at 10:30, and it didn't take him long to notice luggage with the name William Eady, passenger to New York, tagged on it. He boarded the train and began his search for the couple. He found them in the third-class carriage, all loved up and with eyes only for each other. Feeling that alone he would be unable to apprehend them, he jumped back onto the platform and watched as the train left, bound for Glasgow. The couple on board were completely oblivious as to what was happening. The officer then rushed to the solicitor's office in Barnton Street, where he relayed his findings. A fugate warrant, one issued against anyone who owes money to a creditor, but who is in danger of flight in Scotland, was taken out against Eady, and rubber-stamped by the local sheriff, William Gloag. A sheriff officer named Harley, along with Booth, caught the next train for Glasgow. On arrival in the city, the two asked around, but the name William Eady meant nothing to the staff at Queen Street railway station. They suggested they take the little steamer from the Broomielaw, which was about to depart from Greenock with passengers who were going to embark on a ship that would take them to America. As soon as they took their positions up on the bridge between the paddles, the final bell rang, and the Eadys, walking arm in arm, came across the gangway onto the deck of the steamer. Booth spotted them, then cried out to Sheriff Officer Harley, "Look, that's the man." Harley rushed down to the man in question, tapping him on the shoulder and asking him if he was indeed William Eady. When he confirmed he was, he asked what it was all about. Harley pointed to Booth, and when Eady saw her, a wave of realisation swept over him. The quay was crowded, but soon the young man was in handcuffs, being led away. His wife couldn't believe what was happening and asked him, "Oh, Willie, what have you done?" All four headed back to Stirling on the first train they could get. At the sheriff court, Edie stood in front of the sheriff and acknowledged Booth's child was his own. He also admitted he'd not paid any maintenance to her for either herself or the child. He was imprisoned in Stirling jail, but the next day an uncle of his wife's, Daniel McCowan, arrived from Alva, and following negotiations with Booth, offered to pay her £25 in lieu of all claims. However, this young man's ordeal was not over yet. The money was about to be paid when another woman appeared and claimed he was the father of her child too. She also stated that she'd not been paid a penny. She too was from Alva, and although her child was 7 years old, she'd heard that Edie had been leaving for America, so had decided to come forward and throw herself into Edie's tumultuous mix. In the interim, she had married, but she wanted compensation before he left. She felt, like the women from the northeast, that it was only fair he contribute to their child's upbringing. This news made his wife's uncle furious. He refused to now pay the bandwoman her compensation due to the scandalous way Edie had conducted himself over the years. As a result of the non-payment, Edie was once more thrown back into jail, and his wife returned to live with her uncle, where she had lived before her marriage. Meanwhile, the Edie's luggage, made up of 3 trunks of clothes and 1 of provisions, found its way to America. Most likely, it was returned to Scotland on the next boat. Their dream of a new life in America was in tatters.